There's a myth Americans tell themselves after World War II the United States had no choice but to be the world's superpower and preeminent military force. No other countries were strong enough after years of fighting, and it was solely up to the US by virtue of its position to rebuild and reorder the world. The reason that's not true is because the US made a conscious decision to seek military dominance before World War II ended. Such a strategy, forged in the heat of battle, would help the US thwart totalitarian regimes, namely the Soviet Union, in later years while pursuing its own interests. After all, Nazi Germany was winning in Europe and the US didn't want to live in a world full of brutal dictatorships. But the problem is the US hasn't shifted its strategy since, and it's backfired greatly. Instead of focusing on issues like climate change and pandemic disease, for example, the US has prioritized building and deploying a robust force that has made a plethora of unnecessary enemies, and despite some horrific outcomes like the Iraq War, the US refuses to rethink its game plan. Even after the Cold War ended, and his domestic appetite for adventurism dwindles, far from contributing to American security, the plan of global military superiority has made America and Americans less safe. But since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the reason that brought forth US global supremacy has ceased to exist. There was an original argument for the United States shouldering the immense burdens of global military dominance. Without it, totalitarian powers would conquer much of the earth. That would be terrible for the world. The thinking went, and it could be bad for the United States. The problem, though, is the pursuit of military dominance since then has created a lot of enemies of the US that didn't need to be enemies of the US. We've engaged in bad behavior ourselves and stimulated it in others since 1991. Aside from the major defense firms and some ruling elites, America's strategy has been incredibly destructive for people throughout the greater Middle East, and of course the Iraq War resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians, and the American people didn't want out either. I think that we have gotten less safe and more fearful as a society as a result of constantly being told by leaders of both parties that the whole world is out to kill us, and that's why we've got to go to war to kill them first. Now, it's true sometimes that the use of hard power can back up diplomacy and make other endeavors more effective, but we have so overshot the mark that it's more often the case that military dominance gets in the way of the kinds of constructive engagements in the world that I think many people in Washington want to see. What I'm opposed to first and foremost is military dominance as an end in itself. That's what I think it has become in our own time, and I don't think it began that way. That doesn't prohibit the US from being a robust power. It's going to be a great power, and it's going to have a strong military. We should absolutely be able to defend ourselves. I'm not even closing the door on things like humanitarian intervention either. What we have to ask, though, is if the US has used all this power wisely and judiciously. It's clear that we haven't, and it's making all of us in America and around the world less safe. Just think of this: roughly 80 of all US military interventions have occurred after 1991. Can we really say the millions at home and abroad have had their lives improved by that? I don't think so. I certainly agree with those who would say you don't undo things in a hurry, you have to act responsibly but boldly. We do have to break the perpetual war logic of the war on terror, and strangely enough we're kind of coming as a society to that view already. China is a difficult challenge, but I would try to set priorities and act on them. Climate change and pandemic disease are the issues where Chinese behavior is terribly important to the US. There are threats the American people face where they live and work, and so I would really prioritize those issues and improve the relationship around tackling them. Those issues are not well served by the United States pursuing perpetual military dominance in the Indo-Pacific. At the same time, I do think we have to be cautious in observing how China continues to rise and how it behaves. It has not had a record of territorial conquest with anything like the record of past U.S. adversaries like the Axis powers or the Soviet Union. That's a good thing, though you wouldn't know it from all the cries about China's desire to dominate the world emanating from Washington, D.C.